Good, how are you?
Doing well.
All right, so today I'll be speaking to Hannah O'Brien, who was the class of 2019 and studied elementary education and also has a master's in human computer interaction from SUNY Oswego. Welcome, Hannah, and I just shared with everyone your class year of your program, so you can tell everyone about yourself and what you do now in your career.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. Like you said, graduated in 2017 from Oswego with my undergrad in education. Went on to get my master's right after and finished that in 2019. And that was in human computer interaction. And right now I work as a data analyst at National Grid in Syracuse, New York. So primarily working on database management, data analytics, report design, data visualization, and things like that. So it just kind of depends on the day, but that's what I've been doing since I graduated. I actually started that role part-time before I graduated and then went full-time after graduation. So yeah, that's kind of how I got there.
Thank you. So as you know, I have a couple of questions here for you, but for anyone watching, you can put your questions in the chat. So if you have questions. So I think we are very specific because today we're mostly talking about how women have been in male-dominated careers, which is, go us.
Yeah.
First question to you would be, what do you do currently and how did you get?
Yeah, so like I was saying, I'm working at National Grid as a data analyst. Thankfully, on the side of the business that I'm working on in the management side, National Grid is really focused on having like a equal representation and diversity in all of its employees. It's not the same across the whole business because it is really, there's a lot of male-dominated positions in engineering and data analytics and working in the field at my company. So that's a constant push that they're working towards. So I very much understand that. I also did my master's in the STEM field. Women in STEM are poorly represented. So that too. You're working on your MBA. I'm sure it's similar in your program also. So how I got there is, I have a big push for LinkedIn. I can thank LinkedIn for it. I actually got reached out to as I was applying for jobs in my last year of my master's. I applied for so many jobs. I had to start keeping a list of them because I would forget jobs that I applied for and apply to them again. So I had to start keeping a list of the jobs that I was applying, but I got a message on LinkedIn and was kind of like, oh, this is probably just a scam. But it was someone saying like, oh, we're looking for somebody for a job in Syracuse. We think it would match some of like your qualifications and things that you're interested in. So I was like, you know what, if nothing else, it'll be good interview experience. So let me give it a go. And I had a phone interview with a recruiting company in Syracuse for a contractor position at National Grid. And then from the phone interview with the recruiting company, I had an interview with my boss, who's still my boss right now at National Grid. And I got hired for the position. I worked as a contractor through my recruiting company for almost a year before I transitioned into being a full-time employee at National Grid. So I'm coming up on 2 years now as a full-time employee at Grid. So yeah, it's been great. I like it a lot. It's a good position. I'm learning a lot. It's definitely not the path I was anticipating taking, and it's not necessarily the path that I'm planning on staying on forever. What I like about National Grid is there are so many different options of other places that I can go and other departments I can work in and whatnot. So for right now, I like it and I'm learning and it's challenging in the right way. So yeah, that's kind of how I got where I am now.
That sounds pretty amazing. I think LinkedIn has been one of the main things that I use too. So
yeah, it's huge. You can apply for jobs like right on LinkedIn now too. So, that's just a push for if you're a student getting ready to start applying for jobs. Make sure your LinkedIn's updated. Use LinkedIn Learning while you have access to it as an undergrad student and kind of use that to find special skills and things like that you might need for other jobs that you're applying for.
So moving on to the next question, how would you say your identity has played a part in your path?
Yeah, I think a big way that I feel like my identity's played a part in it is that I was a little nervous about going into another path that was different than the path that I started on. So I was doing my undergrad in childhood education. And what's nice about childhood education is there's a pretty clear path that you're following, right? You're going to become a teacher. When I switched over to HCI, Human Computer Interaction, it's a really great program in the sense that there's so many different pathways that you can take and careers that you can go into. But it's also scary because what are you going to do? You know, there's not like a really clear job to apply for. There's some pretty typical ones a lot of people go into, like user experience designer, or user interface researcher, things like that. But there's so many other jobs that are open to you that you can apply for that you wouldn't think of and that you have to kind of search out. And so that was a little nerve-wracking as I was thinking, is this something I want to do? Is this the master's program that I want to go into? Or I can kind of stay in that safer route and just do education and get my master's in teaching, because I was interested in being a teacher and it was something I was thinking about I was going to do. I talked with my advisor at Oswego as I was thinking about, I was getting into my blocks in my junior year. I was thinking about applying for my master's. And she had said, well, you really can't go wrong with doing HCI because it's still a related field to education. So even if after you complete the HCI program, there isn't another job that you're interested in, you can still go on and be a teacher with that master's. So I was like, you know what? Why not? I'm really lucky. I have a great family and I'm come from a privileged background. So I felt like I had a safety net of, let me try this master's program out. And I worked as a graduate assistant actually in the Excel office, which is next to the career services office. So that helped a lot too, because it made like my master's program much more financially manageable because they paid for part of the tuition. So so that was kind of how I got into doing that. But I think going into a field where you're going to be like in a smaller cohort of women that are in the program, that's another thing that HCI is really working on, is like they're one of the only computer science CU related fields that has like a really even split men and women, which is great. But there'd still be classes I would take in some of those computer science undergrad classes where it was me and 5 other girls in a class of like 100 people. So that's just a little weird when you look around. You don't see a lot of other people who look like you in the classes. But I think it was, something that could have held me back from wanting to do that. But thankfully, like Oswego did a really good job of, making that decision feel more comfortable and, making me think that that was a safe option. I also met with the head of the program at HCI, Damian Schofield, and he talked to me about the program some more and told me, we have students come in from history backgrounds and business backgrounds and all sorts of different areas. And then this is something that they go into. So, and talked about the fact that there are so many options for careers down the line. So that made me feel a little bit more comfortable and ultimately led me to going into the program.
Great. Because I took one of the HCI classes too, and significant, there was like a lot of people in the class, but a very few women. So I think that is definitely a great option. And like you said, Damian Schofield was also my professor, and I think he's one of the best.
Yes, the program is so great partially because of him. He started it and he's, helps keep it going and makes it appealing to people from so many different backgrounds and makes it like something that students that are at Oswego, it's really easy to stay at Oswego and carry on to do that program.
Definitely. I'm a MBA student in finance, but I had to take one of the classes and HCI was my option. And I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. So I did, and it really was interesting.
Yeah.
So kind of was to whoever starts with that one of those would be a great start to continue to the program.
Yeah, can't recommend it enough.
Yeah. So what is your best advice for the students who have faced challenges or have a little bit of barriers related to their identity?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this one, and one thing is to kind of flip your identity and look at it as something, look at it in a positive way, right? So a lot of times we talk about identity and we talk about the statistics and the numbers and the women in STEM numbers and all that stuff. And I was part of Girls Who Code as one of the facilitators when I was doing my master's, and that is something we talk about a lot, right? So we're working to get more women into those STEM fields, but flip that on its head and think about it in a positive way, right? That's also what makes you unique and provides a different perspective into those fields. So many things that are being coded and put out today are put out by white men, which is great, but that's only providing the perspective for white men. So there's also like women and minorities and all these other people that need to be represented in technology. So companies need to start getting those people into fields and into high position engineering positions and things like that to make sure those perspectives are being represented. So think about your identity as a way that you're the only person who can provide that unique experience and can provide that information to a company. That's something that's a positive these days, right? You can fill a role where they really, really need that experience so that they can ultimately then have a wider customer base, right? So if you're building something or designing something with a really diverse background of engineers and workers and things like that, that's going to appeal to a really diverse background of people. That's going to fit a broader area of your customer base. So I think that for me, that's just one of the things that I think about, like, oh, it's kind of hard sometimes, being a woman in STEM and applying for positions that you feel like you might not be fully qualified for. On the opposite side of that, it's like, well, I am a woman in STEM. I can provide the female perspective on something that right now they might be lacking. So I think that's one thing to think about. The company I work for has so many people that have worked at the company for like 30 years, right? It's a place that people go and they work there for their whole career. So sometimes I sit in a room and I'm never going to be able to provide that level of experience that those people have. They've been working at that job for their whole lives, their whole adult lives. But I can provide a perspective that's outside of that and has maybe a little less information, which can be a good thing, right? I can look at it in a different way, take it, flip it on its head and say, well, have you thought about it this way? And just because those people have so much experience, they might not have ever even taken an opportunity to think about it in a different way. So it's, sometimes that lack of experience or that something that might seem like a barrier because of an identity like you place on yourself, being a woman or being young or being, a little less experienced in a field, can actually benefit you so much more than you think it's going to. So I've had that come up a bunch of times, right? Or I know a software that they don't know or a tool that we can use that they don't know. So there's times where it's more of a benefit than a barrier. So the other thing is really find your champions. So you're going to find people that support you and want you to succeed in everything you're doing. Like, keep those people in your back pocket, keep the emails that they write you that lift you up and all that kind of stuff. Reach out to them. Like, I've reached out to the Oswego alumni offices and like people I met at Oswego all the time for like ideas on how to do things differently or different people to reach out to for things. And you make so many great connections because of this opportunity, this whole group of people you have open to you, right? So keep all of those champions in your back pocket. Find the people in your future career that you're going to go into that are always going to go to bat for you. And those are the people that you can go to when you're feeling like those barriers or you're feeling a little lower about yourself. Those are the people that are going to remind you like, hey, you're here for a reason. You've earned the spot that you have right now. When you're feeling that imposter syndrome, they're the one that's going to say, no, you've done this, this, and this. This is why you're supposed to be in this position right now that you're in. On the side of that too, I keep a list of achievements that I use like at the end of the year when I have my yearly review with my boss. I run through it so I can be like, here's the stuff I'm going to talk to you about that I've worked on this year. But on the flip side of that, I use it too and say, wow, I feel like I haven't done anything like helpful lately. I'm kind of feeling low about my job. I feel like an imposter. I don't belong here right now. And then I'm like, oh wait, I did this, and kind of run through that list of achievements. And I'm like, all right, I'm good. Let's keep going. Let's tackle this next challenge I'm facing. So
yeah, I think that is great perspective on how everything that you're doing. I love the fact that you said that you keep your achievements intact so that you can go over it at the end of the year. I think that's very special, especially at, like you said, in the STEM industry or industry where men are usually very dominated, which is really great. So since graduating, how have you learned more about your identity and the value it has brought to you as a professional?
Yeah, I think it's really challenging when you shift from being a student to being a professional. When you're a student, you have so many options for you to like pin your identity on, right? So when you're in school, you're an athlete or you're in a club or you're in a sorority or a fraternity, like you have different things that you can use as like your markers of your identity, separate from obviously like being a woman or your ethnicity or things like that. It's a lot different when you leave college because some of those things that you really counted on as being your identity, you don't have access to anymore. So like when I was in school, I had my job as a GA and I had Girls Who Code that I was part of, and I had my friends up at school, that I had, and I had other jobs outside of that I did. So those were all parts of like who I saw myself as and what my identity was. And then I graduated and I was like, oh, all of those are gone. And like, I have all this free time now after work where I don't have to do homework and things like that. So I think that can be like a really stark transition for people. I think what's important is that you have to then actively seek out ways to find what your identity is going to be, right? So for me, that meant like finding ways that I can like volunteer and get involved in Syracuse, where I'm living and in my community. And there's so many options. I'm lucky where I work. We have employee resource groups. So there's all sorts of different groups. There's a pride group, and then there's a new net group, which is for new people at the company, and like all sorts of different things like that. And so getting involved in those is really nice because you can meet other people that you work with. And it's also like another way to pin your identity to something, right? And kind of shape what your identity is going to be as a professional. So I think that is one thing that's a big change is for me, is that I've had to actively kind of seek out what that identity is for me. So find additional roles and responsibilities you can take on, or projects you can get involved in at work that can help you find things you're interested in. It's also doing that has helped me find other pathways I might be interested in taking at National Grid, and like lateral shifts I might be interested in taking in my position and things like that. Find things that you like to do for fun. I teach ski lessons on the weekends during the winter. I work at an ice cream shop for fun during the summer. Like, just you have to be the one who's going to actively search out the stuff and those opportunities that you enjoy doing. So that's kind of the way that my identity shifted, is that I've had to be the one to shift it. Whereas when you're in college, like you do still have to get involved in stuff, but it's so you go to the student involvement fair, there's 100 opportunities for you right there. So it's a lot different. There's no student involvement fair for adults.
Very big shift from being in college to actually the reality of the world, and like you back. So it's not like somebody's handing you in that opportunity. It's just like you gotta seek it out, like you
exactly. Yep. And like I moved back to where I grew up from or nearby there, right? So I still have friends in the area, but like think about people that are moving to new states for new jobs and things like that. Like you actively, and I mean, you came from Sri Lanka to America, you had to make a whole new set of friends, right, when you got here. So like when you do that and you move to a new place, like in college, you had all sorts of friends around you to make that were around you. When you go into a professional setting, it's like you can make friends with your coworkers, but it's a little bit more challenging and things like that. So you've got to find ways.
Or it's exactly colleagues in college, your friends, or who you're doming with, or anybody. When you go with corporate world, it's very difficult. I mean, you will find, but it's there's some things going on, and it'll be a little hard.
Yes, it's a little different, and you have to keep that like professional relationship too on the side on that. So yeah, I think it's just about like shaping your identity to be what you want it to be, right? So find things that are going to fill you up, because otherwise, even when you have nothing else going on, I'm a true believer that like if you're not bringing your best self to the things that you're doing, how can you help anybody else, right? So if I'm not feeling fulfilled outside of work, or even feeling fulfilled at work with the stuff that I'm doing, how am I going to support other people at work, and how am I going to support my loved ones outside of work if it's like I don't have anything left to give, I don't have anything that's like exciting that I'm working towards? So, and sometimes, like I'm sure you've taken classes that feel like they're like dragging the life out of you, right? They're just not something you're really interested in, but you have to take them because it's part of your program. Versus there's other ones that you take that like you're like, wow, this is exactly what I'm interested in doing. It's going to be the same way in your professional life. You're going to have some projects that you work on that you feel like, wow, this is exactly why I'm doing this, and this is why I want to be here, and I feel like I'm making a difference. And then there's going to be other ones that are just part of the job that are not your favorite thing. You've got to counteract that with filling it up with stuff that makes you excited to be there. Ask your boss. There's always opportunities for different projects you can get on. I've done a bunch of like shadowing and job shadowing in my job. That's a huge way to learn about other positions at the career that you end up in. So shape your identity and make it what you want to be, right?
Great advice. I love everything that you're saying. It's actually very helpful to me as well, because right now after graduation, I'm moving on to another professional life. And I think it's it's great advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Well, thank you so much again, Hannah, for sharing your experience and insights and this time with us. And thank you for everyone who's watching. If you do have any questions for Hannah, just make sure you put it up in the chat. I'll give you a couple minutes if they want to share any questions. But other than that, thanks again, Hannah, for joining with us. And everyone that's watching, check out the rest of our Imagine 2022 program, oswego.edu/imagine2022. and have a great day. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Hannah, again.
Thanks, Clara. That was great. Have a good one.
Have a good one.